The sanctuary represents a sacred place. In this sacred place, we want to experience transformation. This transformation begins with discovering God's peace. It's about the discovery of God within yourself. Heavenly Mother made this interesting statement in the 7th endowment. She says, "To whom then shall I speak? Who will my mystery touch? Who among so many children will set aside their lesser selves and with an eager, humble mind embrace the heart of all my wisdom to make it as their own?" When you have a sanctuary, you are setting aside a place where you want to hear God. You want to feel God in yourself. And the thing that you experience is the peace of God. Because it's a gift that is discovered. But it only carries power if you can emanate, reflect this peace that you have experienced with God. Heavenly Mother asked another interesting question. This is in the 6th endowment. I'm going to read this to you. I tell you, it's in the 7th endowment, chapter 6. And she asked a really interesting question. What one gift would you give the world to lift it from despair? What good act of godly grace would you plant within the heart to brighten well the darkest day and to fill the world with hope? What one vision would you bravely dream to make it come alive, to change forever the world around and to fill it up with joy? Would you now commit yourself to be a good example? Could you yourself become the light which reveals the heart of God, chasing away the darkest shadows which cloud the minds of men? Can you set aside your fears and prove the strength of God, holding up before the world a faith which never fails? Well, these are interesting questions. What one gift would you give the world? Can you give the world God's peace? This peace that you discover, you find revealed in the sacred place of the sanctuary. Can that be given to the world? No. You can't give the world that peace. Only God may give that peace. The one gift you give the world is your peace. I have come very well acquainted with the peace that comes from God. I am the friend of God. I see Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother quite often, speak with them face to face. But regardless of my unique position with regard to God, I cannot give the world God's peace. I can only give them my peace. The peace I find reflected when I commune with God. That is what you give the world. You know, it's an important distinction to make.
So do you have to be a true Gnostic in order to have a sanctuary in your home?
Oh, no. No. Anyone who really wants to experience God, I would encourage that person to create a sanctuary in their home. Create a sacred place that has boundaries. It is set apart from every other place. And in that place, you make room for the sacred. You can be a Baptist, you can be a Catholic, you can be a Mormon, you can be a Hindu, you can be a Muslim, you can be an atheist. Everyone, regardless of their religious background or political background or lack thereof, everybody can have a sacred place. Because I'll tell you something, if you can't find the sacred place in your home, you'll never find it outside of it. I know people who travel hither and yon to go see special places. It's like they can't wait to escape their home, escape the family. I wonder what kind of homes they have. What kind of families have you created for yourselves that you can't wait to get away from them? No temple, no tabernacle, no church can be sacred if your home is not sacred. That's the big distinction between the true Gnostic church and everyone else. I tell people right up front that the most sacred place on this planet is the sanctuary in your home. Because that's where the most tender feelings of all are found. Tender feelings we feel for spouses, children, special feelings we feel for home. Home is a good word. Family is a good word. And so there should be a special place where these things gather into a sacred moment. And in that sacred moment, that sacred place, you find God revealed in you. The sanctuary is literally the place of transformation. It is the place of empowerment. It is the place of revelation. I can reveal God to you and have in the Song of God. But God wishes to reveal themselves to you also. They encourage you to write it in a book. Put it in your altar. Anyone can have a sanctuary. Dedicate a room, a place, a spot in your home. Put an altar there. The altar symbolizes the place of covenants, where you and God meet upon your sacred word of honor. I am bound to God by covenant. My sacred word of honor. These covenants are placed on an altar and are in force. You can do the same thing. In the Book of Wisdom, Heavenly Mother makes this really interesting promise. She's talking about sanctuaries. And this is what she has to say about sanctuaries in the Book of Wisdom. Now, keep in mind, this relates to people, this concerns people who want to have a sanctuary in their home. You don't necessarily have to be a member of the true Gnostic Church. You know, if you're a human being, you have a right to a sanctuary. And this is what Heavenly Mother says about that sanctuary. For in your hand is found a power to create on earth a bit of heaven where God might be revealed, a place within your very home where the holy and sacred meet, to bind on earth the things of God through the living of your life. Build therefore a sanctuary in your home, to be for you and all your house a holy of holies, having in itself both the altar and mercy seat, and let this prove the sacred place where you and God confer through the moving of the Spirit. For all that is holy and come from God is first made manifest in the sanctuary of the home. And from there shall the Spirit of God move into the life of the family, which Spirit is carried into the tabernacle of God's peace to bless the community in which you live. Let then the sanctuary of your home be that very fount from which all good things do flow forth into the world, flowing from the life you live to touch and empower both the tabernacle and temple together, creating within the garden places the hush of sacred things filled with joy and hope and peace. Come now and sit you by and rest your mind in me, and even I will whisper into your heart a wonder filled with glory, And in the telling and the hearing shall you become enlightened to prove yourself in the doing as one who stands empowered. Know you then and do not doubt, for I am always with you in the living of your life, to build in you the sacred fire of all God's wisdom, to inspire in you the touch of holy things. Now that's available to everybody. You don't have to be a member of the True Gnostic Church. Meet the criteria for a sanctuary, and God will honor that sanctuary. A sanctuary is only as sacred as you are willing to make it. And if a sanctuary does not require from you a little bit of sacrifice with regard to time and effort, don't expect it to be sacred. The sacred is established by our willingness to make a sacrifice of our time, our efforts. And of course, the sanctuary will cost you a little money to build, to make. It's got to be the nicest room in the house. It's got to have the most beautiful furnishings, because you expect to meet the spirit and mind of God in this sacred place. Don't cut corners. Don't pinch pennies. Don't buy yourself a 42-inch screen plasma TV and then expect to build a sanctuary for pennies and that God would be content with that. God will know where your heart is. And your heart is always where you're willing to spend the most money and the most effort. That's where your heart is. And anyone who tells you different, it has deceived them. They've deceived themselves. People deceive themselves all the time with regard to what is actually important. One of the most important lessons God ever gave me was a simple statement: people always do what is most important. I remember a man 30 years ago came and told me that reading his scriptures was the most important thing in his life. That's what he told me. I looked at that man and said, Thomas, how much time do you spend reading your scriptures every day? He says, well, I spend at least 15 minutes every day. Really? And that's the most important thing to you in your life. That's what you just said. Isn't that correct? Well, yes, absolutely. Thomas, how much TV do you watch a day? And he goes, about 3 or 4 hours worth. I see. What was most important? We deceive ourselves 1,000 times a day. We think that if we pay ourselves lip service, God's going to buy the delusion. As though God is so stupid, He has to believe everything that falls out of our mouth. And we don't believe it ourselves. Why do you expect God to believe it? The sanctuary should be the most sacred, beautiful place in your home. You're creating a part of heaven within your home. That's what Heavenly Mother says. Heavenly Mother, she has a lot of knowledge on this subject. She knows what sacred places are. Again, this is what she says. It's in the Book of Wisdom. I'll read it to you. Heavenly Mother says this: for in your hand is found a power to create on earth a bit of heaven, where God might be revealed. A place within your very home where the holy and sacred meet, to bind on earth the things of God through the living of your life. So when you walk into a sanctuary, you should be stepping from your home into a part of the celestial kingdom, because it's bound by covenant. It's connected by the tail. But it should be set apart. It should be dedicated. Don't make that room look like any other room in the house. It has to have a special door that identifies this room as sacred. And when you open the door, it should just take your breath away. Now that's the ideal. Not everybody can do the ideal. I know I can't. I live in a single bedroom house. Apartment. So I make do. I adapt. I improvise. I overcome. But I don't quit. I don't despair. I don't throw up my hand and say, well, I don't have the perfect situation, so I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to wait until the perfect situation arises. Well, this isn't a Walt Disney story here. This is real life. The ideal situation may not come around for a while. Are you going to do without a sanctuary? Are you going to do without a sacred place, a sacred moment? I'm not. Now listen to me. One of these days, this church is going to build a tabernacle in the city. It will be called the Tabernacle of God's Peace. But that tabernacle has nothing in it to make it sacred. Listen to me on this point. It has nothing in and of itself to make it sacred. What makes that tabernacle sacred are all the families that come into it from the sanctuaries in their home. It is a sanctuary of the home that empowers the tabernacle and makes it sacred. If I had to choose between the tabernacle of God's peace and the sanctuary in my home, I'd choose the sanctuary of my home. The tabernacle of God's peace is for the community. The sanctuary is for yourself. It's for your family. But we just don't want to reach out to our immediate family. There's another family we belong to. It's the family of man. It's the human family. We also need to reach out to them and create for them a sacred place. We call that the Tabernacle of God's Peace. Now, one of these days, there will be a temple of the living endowment. Not a temple of dead endowments where people are being buried, baptized for dead people. I'm talking about a temple of the living endowment. There's only going to be one of them on the planet. Not two, not three, not a dozen, just one. It will have its own special garden called the Gardens of Ondi-Ahman. And do you think that temple by itself will be sacred? No. It has nothing of itself to make it sacred. It becomes sacred when God's children who have sanctuaries in their home go into that temple, having come from their own sanctuaries, bringing the Spirit of God with them to see for themselves the living endowment which God has prepared for them. Now the sanctuary is for your home. It's for yourself. It's for your husbands, your wives, your children, your uncles, your aunts, your friends. The tabernacle is for the community. The temple, well, that's for the world. The temple is where blessings flow out into the world to touch the global village of humanity. We enshrine our humanity in the sanctuary. We bring that sacred flame into the tabernacle. We go from the tabernacle and we carry that sacred flame into that one special temple of the living endowment, where God reaches forth through the veils of endless time. And in a place which is not a place, upon a day which is not a day, in a time which is not a time, God touches the minds of men and women and children and makes them eternal by filling them with a sacred fire which comes from God. It all begins in your sanctuary.